Min Jae Park sat in the airport terminal and closed his eyes. His body felt heavy with exhaustion. For the past 72 hours, he had not slept more than a few minutes at a time. The business meetings in Seoul had been intense and difficult but successful. His technology company had just completed a merger worth billions of dollars. Now he just wanted to go home to New York. He looked down at his clothes. A gray hoodie, comfortable jeans, and worn sneakers. Not the usual business suit he wore to important meetings. But after 3 days of negotiations, wearing tight formal clothes, he had changed into something comfortable for the long flight home. He was a billionaire, yes, but comfort mattered more than appearance right now. Min Jae had built his artificial intelligence company from nothing. He grew up poor in Busan, South Korea. His mother cleaned offices and airplanes to pay for his education. His father had left when he was young. Life had been hard, but his mother always told him to work hard and dream big. Now at 38 years old, he was worth over $8 billion. His company created software that helped hospitals diagnose diseases faster and more accurately. The announcement came over the speakers. His flight was boarding. First-class passengers could board first. Min Jae picked up his small carry-on bag and walked to the gate. He had his boarding pass on his phone and his passport ready. As he entered the airplane, a flight attendant stood near the entrance. Her name tag read So-yeon Kim. She was checking boarding passes and welcoming passengers. When Min Jae approached, she looked at him from head to toe. Her smile disappeared. "Excuse me, sir," Seo-yeon said. Her voice was not friendly. "I think you are in the wrong line. Economy class boards later." Min Jae smiled politely. "No, I have a first-class ticket." He showed her his phone with the boarding pass clearly displayed. Seo-yeon barely looked at the screen. "That does not look right. Can I see your passport?" Min Jae found this strange, but he showed her his passport. She studied it for a long time, looking back and forth between his face and the photo. "Wait here," she said and walked away without explaining why. Min Jae stood near the entrance while other passengers squeezed past him. A white man in shorts and a t-shirt walked by. So-yeon smiled at him warmly and said, "Welcome aboard, sir. Your seat is to the right." That man did not have to show anything except his phone. Min Jae felt something uncomfortable in his stomach. He knew this feeling. He had felt it many times before in his life. Seo-yeon returned with another flight attendant. "Sir, we need to verify your ticket." "This seems unusual." "Unusual?" Min Jae asked calmly. "What is unusual about it?" "First-class tickets are very expensive," Seo-yeon said loudly. Several passengers turning their heads to look. "We need to make sure this ticket is real and not fake." Min Jae felt his face grow warm, but he kept his voice steady. "I can show you my confirmation email. I can show you my credit card. I can call the airline if you need me to." "That will not be necessary," Seo-yeon said, but her tone suggested she did not believe him. "But I do need to see more identification." "I already showed you my passport," Min Jae said. His patience was starting to wear thin, but he remained polite. An older woman in first class spoke up from her seat. "Young man, is there a problem?" "This gentleman has been waiting a long time." Seo-yeon ignored her. She spoke into her radio. "I need security at gate 12. We have a situation." Min Jae could not believe what was happening. "A situation? I am just trying to board the plane with my valid ticket." "Sir, please calm down," Seo-yeon said, even though Min Jae was completely calm. "You are causing a disturbance." "I am not causing anything," Min Jae replied. "I am standing here quietly while you refuse to let me board." More passengers were watching now. Some had their phones out, recording the interaction. A businessman in first class stood up. "This is ridiculous. Let the man board the plane. We all want to leave on time." Security officers arrived quickly. 2 large men in uniforms walked up to Min Jae. Seo-yeon spoke to them quietly. But Min Jae heard her say, "He is refusing to cooperate and he might have a fake ticket." "That is not true," Min Jae said firmly to the security officers. "I have shown her my valid ticket and passport multiple times. I have done nothing wrong." One security officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, can you please come with us to sort this out?" "Sort what out?" Min Jae asked. "I have a plane to catch. I have shown everything I need to show." "Why am I being treated this way?" The other passengers in first class began to protest. "This is wrong," one woman shouted. "He has done nothing wrong," another man added. Several people were definitely recording on their phones now. Seo-yeon's face turned red. "If you do not leave quietly, We will have to remove you by force. Min-jae looked at the security officers. He looked at Seo-yeon. He looked at all the passengers watching him. In that moment, he had to make a choice. He could fight and argue and make a scene, or he could leave with dignity and deal with this another way. I will leave, Min-jae said quietly, but this is not over. I will be contacting the airline about this treatment. You are free to file a complaint. Sir, Seo-yeon said with a fake smile. As the security officers escorted Min-jae back through the terminal, he heard the passengers on the plane shouting in protest. This is discrimination, someone yelled. Shame on this airline, another person called out. Min-jae walked with his head up. His mother had taught him to always maintain his dignity, no matter what. But inside, he felt the same pain he had felt as a child when people looked at him and made assumptions based on his appearance. In the terminal, one of the security officers spoke quietly. Sir, I am sorry about this. That did not seem right to me. Min-jae nodded. Thank you for saying that. The officer hesitated. For what it is worth, I believe you had a real ticket. I did, Min-jae said. I do. He sat down in the terminal and watched his plane pull away from the gate without him. He thought about his mother who had spent her life cleaning airplanes, dreaming that one day her son would fly in first class and be treated with respect. She had died 2 years ago, never knowing he had become so successful. Min-jae pulled out his phone. He had several missed calls from his executive team. They were probably wondering why he was not on the plane. He also had a message from an unknown number. It was a video. Someone on the plane had sent him the recording of what had happened. He watched the video. It showed everything. Seo-yeon's hostile attitude, her loud accusations, the way she called security even though he had done nothing wrong. The way she treated him compared to how she treated the white passengers. The video had already been posted online. Min-jae saw it was being shared rapidly. Comments were pouring in from people who were angry about what they saw. The video already had thousands of views, and it had only been posted minutes ago. His phone rang. It was his company's head of communications. Min-jae, are you okay? We just saw a video going viral. Is that you? Yes, Min-jae said tiredly. That is me. This is outrageous. We need to respond. The media will be calling soon. Min-jae thought for a moment. He could stay quiet. He could just book another flight and move on with his life. That is what he had always done before when people discriminated against him. Stay quiet, work harder, prove them wrong through success. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was because he was tired. Maybe it was because he thought about his mother. Maybe it was because he saw other passengers defending him, showing him that people cared about justice. Not yet, Min-jae said. Let me think about this. He ended the call and sat in the empty terminal. The next flight to New York was not for another 6 hours. He had plenty of time to think about what to do next. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. Sometimes silence is acceptance, Min-jae. If you stay quiet when people treat you badly, they will keep treating everyone badly. Min-jae looked at his phone again. The video now had 50,000 views. People were tagging Pacific Sky Airways demanding answers. The airline had not responded yet. He made a decision. This was not just about him anymore. It was about every person who had been judged by their appearance. Every person who had been humiliated for no reason. Every person who stayed quiet because they did not think anyone would listen. Min-jae opened his email and began typing a message to his lawyer. By the time Min-jae boarded his evening flight to New York, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. His phone kept buzzing with notifications. News websites were writing articles about the incident. Social media was exploding with angry comments directed at Pacific Sky Airways. On the new flight with a different airline, the staff treated him with extreme politeness. They had clearly seen the video. The flight attendants kept apologizing even though they had done nothing wrong. We are so sorry for what happened to you, one said. That should never happen to anyone. Min-jae appreciated their kindness, but he felt exhausted. He just wanted to sleep. When he finally arrived in New York, reporters were waiting at the airport. Somehow they had found out which flight he was on. Mr. Park, how do you feel about what happened? Will you be suing the airline? Do you think this was racial discrimination? The questions came at him from all directions. Min-jae kept walking. His driver helped him get through the crowd. "No comment right now," Min-jae said. "I need time to process everything." At home in his apartment overlooking Central Park, Min-jae finally had silence. He made himself tea and sat by the window. His phone continued buzzing, but he put it on silent. He needed to think clearly. The next morning, Pacific Sky Airways released a statement. Min-jae read it on his computer. "We regret any inconvenience experienced by our passenger. We are reviewing the incident and will take appropriate action. We value all our customers and strive to provide excellent service to everyone." The statement made Min-jae angry. It was generic and meaningless. They said inconvenience like he had experienced a delayed flight. They did not acknowledge discrimination. They did not apologize properly. They did not even use his name. His phone rang. It was his chief operating officer, a woman named Yoon-seo Kang. "Min-jae, I am glad you are home safe. Have you seen the statement from Pacific Sky?" "I just read it," Min-jae said. "It is insulting," Yoon-seo replied. "The board of directors wants to know if you plan to take action. Several of our investors fly Pacific Sky frequently. They are concerned about this." "Concerned about what?" "About being treated the same way," Yoon-seo explained. "3 of our board members are Korean. 2 are black, 1 is Arab. They all travel frequently for business. If this airline treats a billionaire CEO this way, how will they treat regular passengers?" Min-jae had not thought about it that way. This was not just about him. This affected everyone who looked like him, or different from what flight attendants expected. That afternoon, more passengers came forward. A black doctor named Dr. Angela Thompson posted her story online. She had been on a Pacific Sky flight 6 months ago when another passenger had a medical emergency. When she offered to help, the flight attendant asked her to prove she was really a doctor. They made her show her medical license before they would let her help the sick passenger. "I carry my license now whenever I fly," Dr. Thompson wrote, "just in case someone doubts me because of my skin color." An Arab businessman named Khalid Rahman shared his experience. He had been searched 3 times on one Pacific Sky flight. His bags were checked repeatedly. Other passengers were not searched at all. "I felt like a criminal," he wrote. "I had done nothing wrong except exist." More stories appeared. A Latina lawyer, an Asian student, an elderly black man, all describing similar treatment on Pacific Sky Airways flights. The airline had not responded to any of these stories. They had ignored the complaints. Min-jae's executive team came to his apartment that evening for an emergency meeting. His lawyer, his head of communications, Yoon-seo, and his chief financial officer all sat in his living room. "The media wants a statement from you," his communications director said. "Every major news outlet has requested an interview. What do you want to do?" His lawyer asked. Min-jae thought about his mother. She had worked for an airline, cleaning planes at night. She had been treated poorly by passengers who looked down on cleaning staff. She never complained. She told Min-jae that complaining would only make things worse. "Just work hard," she always said. "Let your success speak for you." But success had not protected Min-jae. His $8 billion had not mattered when that flight attendant looked at his hoodie and jeans and decided he did not belong in first class. "I want to sue them," Min-jae said. Everyone in the room looked at him. His lawyer nodded slowly. "That is your right. We can definitely build a case. But think carefully," Yoon-seo added. "A lawsuit means publicity. Months or years of attention. The media will follow every detail. It will be stressful." "I know," Min-jae said. "But if I stay quiet, nothing changes. That flight attendant will keep treating people this way. The airline will keep ignoring complaints. Other airlines will think this behavior is acceptable." His chief financial officer spoke up. "A lawsuit sends a message. It tells the whole industry that discrimination has real consequences." "Exactly," Min-jae agreed. "I do not care about the money. I want them to change their policies. I want training programs. I want accountability. I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else." His lawyer pulled out a notepad. "Okay, let me explain what we are looking at. We can sue for discrimination, emotional distress, and possibly violation of civil rights. We need to investigate if this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern." "It is a pattern," Min-jae said. "Look at all the stories coming out. This has been happening for years." Over the next few days, Min-jae's legal team worked quickly. They hired investigators to look into Pacific Sky Airways history. What they found was disturbing. The flight attendant who had removed Min Jae from the plane, Seo-yeon Kim, had 17 complaints against her in 3 years. All 17 complaints came from passengers of color. Every single one. The complaints had been filed properly. They had gone through the airline's official process, but nothing had ever been done. Each complaint was marked as customer sensitivity issue and closed without investigation. The investigators found emails between supervisors discussing Seo-yeon. She is very strict about security, one supervisor wrote. Some passengers find her approach too aggressive, but she is just being careful. Being careful about what? Min Jae asked when he read the emails. Being careful about black and brown passengers? The investigation revealed more problems. Pacific Sky Airways had no real diversity training. New employees watched a 30-minute video about treating everyone with respect, and that was it. The video had been made 15 years ago and had not been updated. There was no system for tracking discrimination complaints. No one checked if certain employees had patterns of behavior. No one looked at whether certain types of passengers were treated differently. The employee handbook had vague language about maintaining security and using good judgment. This meant flight attendants could make their own decisions about who looked suspicious or out of place. And these judgments were clearly based on race and appearance. Min Jae's lawyer, Hee-jin Lee, came to his office to discuss the findings. Hee-jin was famous for taking on large corporations in discrimination cases. She had won major victories for civil rights and had a reputation for being tough and thorough. This is bigger than one flight attendant, Hee-jin said. This is systemic discrimination. The airline created an environment where this behavior was allowed and even protected. Can we prove that in court? Min Jae asked. Absolutely, Hee-jin replied. We have the complaint records. We have the emails. We have testimony from former employees who are willing to be whistleblowers. And we have all these passengers coming forward with similar stories. How strong is our case? Hee-jin smiled. Very strong. But you need to be prepared. Pacific Sky Airways will fight hard. They will try to settle quietly with a non-disclosure agreement. They will offer you money to go away. I will not take it, Min Jae said firmly. Good, Hee-jin responded. Because this case could change the entire airline industry. Every airline is watching. If we win, they will all have to examine their own practices. That evening, Pacific Sky Airways' legal team contacted Min Jae. They offered a settlement of $2 million if he agreed not to discuss the incident publicly and dropped any potential lawsuit. Min Jae laughed when he heard the offer. $2 million? I make more than that in a week from my company investments. They think I care about $2 million? They are insulting you, Hee-jin said. They think you will take the money and stay quiet. Call them back, Min Jae instructed. Tell them the offer is rejected. Tell them we are filing a lawsuit. And tell them this is going to be public. The next day, news broke that Min Jae was officially suing Pacific Sky Airways. The lawsuit demanded $500 million in damages. More importantly, it demanded major policy changes. The airline would have to implement real diversity training. They would have to create an independent review board for discrimination complaints. They would have to publish annual reports on passenger treatment. But Min Jae did not care about the headlines. He cared about change. Civil rights organizations reached out to offer support. The NAACP issued a statement backing the lawsuit. Asian American advocacy groups joined in. Hispanic organizations added their voices. Hee-jin Lee's law office was filled with boxes of documents. Her team had been working nonstop for 2 weeks, gathering evidence for the lawsuit against Pacific Sky Airways. Min Jae visited the office to review their progress. We have found 47 documented incidents, Hee-jin explained, pointing to a chart on the wall. 47 times in the past 3 years where passengers of color were treated differently than white passengers on Pacific Sky flights. Min Jae studied the chart. Red dots marked each incident on a timeline. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Some of these are worse than what happened to you, Hee-jin continued. A Nigerian businessman was detained for 3 hours because a flight attendant said his passport looked fake. It was real. A Korean grandmother was removed from a flight because she did not speak English well enough. She had flown internationally dozens of times before without problems. A young lawyer named David Chen added more information. We found internal memos that show management knew about these problems. They received monthly reports showing complaint patterns. They saw that certain flight attendants had multiple complaints from minority passengers. But they did nothing. Why? Min-jae asked. Why would they ignore clear evidence? Hyejin sat down at the conference table. Several reasons. First, investigating complaints costs money. Training costs money. Firing experienced staff and hiring new people costs money. It was cheaper to ignore the problem and hope it went away. Second, David continued, the airline industry is very focused on security after terrorist attacks. Flight attendants are told to watch for suspicious behavior, but the training does not define what suspicious means, so people use their own biases and prejudices. They see a black man in a hoodie and think he does not belong in first class, Min-jae said quietly. Exactly, Hyejin agreed. And the airline gave them the power to make those judgments without consequences. Another lawyer, Maria Santos, pulled out a thick folder. We also found Pacific Sky Airways training materials. The diversity training is a joke. New employees watch a 30-minute video that was made in 2010. The video basically says be nice to everyone and do not use racial slurs. That is it. What about ongoing training? Min-jae asked. Nothing, Maria replied. Once you watch that video, you never have to do diversity training again. Meanwhile, employees get monthly security training, weekly safety training, and constant updates about procedures. But nothing about treating passengers fairly. Hyejin opened her laptop and showed Min-jae a document. This is the employee handbook section on passenger interactions. Listen to this language. It says flight attendants should use good judgment when assessing passenger behavior. They should be alert to anything unusual or out of place. They have authority to remove passengers if they feel uncomfortable or sense a security risk. That language lets them do whatever they want, Min-jae observed. Correct, Hyejin said. There is no definition of what makes someone seem out of place. No guidelines about actual security threats versus personal biases. The policy basically says trust your gut. And if your gut is filled with racist assumptions, the airline has given you permission to act on them. David showed Min-jae another file. We interviewed 12 former Pacific Sky employees. They all confirmed the same culture. Management cares about efficiency and cost savings. They do not care about discrimination complaints unless they become public relations problems. Did any of these employees witness discrimination? Min-jae asked. All of them, Maria answered. One former flight attendant, a black woman named Lisa Johnson, told us she was constantly asked to prove her identity when she traveled on other airlines. Even wearing her Pacific Sky uniform, people assumed she could not possibly be a flight attendant. When she complained to her supervisors about the discrimination she faced, they told her to toughen up. Hyejin pulled up an email on her computer. This is from the Vice President of Operations, sent 2 years ago. A passenger had written a detailed complaint about being racially profiled. The VP's response was to mark it as a customer sensitivity issue and close the file. He wrote, and I quote, "These passengers need to understand that security is our top priority. If they feel uncomfortable being asked extra questions, perhaps they should consider other airlines." Min-jae felt his anger rising. He basically told passengers, if you do not like being discriminated against, fly somewhere else. That is exactly what he said, Hyejin confirmed. We have dozens of emails like this. The attitude comes from the top of the company. Over the next hour, the legal team showed Min-jae more evidence. Phone calls from passengers that were never returned, complaint forms that disappeared, supervisors who defended employees with obvious bias problems. They found that Seo-yeon Kim, the flight attendant who removed Min-jae from the plane, had been promoted twice despite 17 complaints. Her supervisors called her diligent and security conscious. They rewarded her behavior instead of correcting it. We need to show this was not just one bad employee, Hyejin explained. We need to prove the entire system was broken. That is how we get meaningful change. What about the CEO? Min-jae asked. What does Ji-hoon Choi say about all this? David pulled out more documents. The CEO has made several statements to the media. He says the incident with you was unfortunate but rare. He claims Pacific Sky has strong anti-discrimination policies. He insists the company treats all passengers equally. But that is a lie, Min-jae said. We can prove it is a lie, Hyejin replied. We have his emails too. 2 months before your incident, a civil rights organization contacted Pacific Sky. They offered to provide free diversity training. They said they had heard complaints about the airline and wanted to help. What happened? Ji-hoon Choi personally declined the offer, Hyejin said. He wrote that Pacific Sky already has adequate training and does not need outside help. He said hiring consultants would send the wrong message, suggesting the company has problems. He chose to protect the company image instead of fixing the actual problems. Min-jae shook his head in disbelief, so he knew there were issues and chose to ignore them. Worse, Maria added. He actively rejected solutions. We have proof that 3 different diversity consulting firms reached out over 2 years. All 3 were turned away. The CEO said their services were too expensive and not necessary. How much did they cost? Min-jae asked. David checked his notes. The most expensive proposal was $50,000 for a comprehensive training program. That is nothing for an airline that makes billions in revenue. They spend more than that on cleaning supplies, Min-jae said. Exactly our point, Hyejin agreed. This shows their priorities. They will spend money on everything except treating passengers with dignity. A paralegal entered the room with more documents. We just got the response from Pacific Sky's lawyers. They want to meet. Hyejin read the letter quickly. They are proposing a settlement meeting. They want to discuss terms before the case goes to trial. What kind of terms? Min-jae asked. They do not say specifically, Hyejin replied. But I can guess. They will offer you money to drop the lawsuit and sign a non-disclosure agreement. They want this to go away quietly. I already said no to $2 million, Min-jae reminded her. They will offer more this time, Hyejin predicted. Maybe $10 million. Maybe 20. They will make it tempting. Min-jae stood up and walked to the window. Outside, people hurried along the New York sidewalks. All different colors and backgrounds going about their lives. How many of them had experienced discrimination? How many had stayed quiet because they thought no one would care? I do not want their settlement money, Min-jae said. I want to go to trial. I want all of this evidence to become public record. I want every airline in the world to see what happens when you build a system that allows discrimination. Hyejin smiled. That is what I hoped you would say. But I need you to understand what you are choosing. A trial means months of preparation. It means testimony, where you will have to relive that humiliation. Pacific Sky's lawyers will try to attack your character. They will look for anything in your past they can use against you. I have nothing to hide, Min-jae said. They will also make this expensive, David added. Our legal fees could reach several $1,000,000. They will drag this out hoping you get tired and give up. Min-jae almost laughed. I built a billion-dollar company from nothing. I have faced challenges much harder than this. If they think I will give up, they do not know who they are dealing with. Good, Hyejin said, because we are ready to fight. We have the evidence. We have the witnesses. We have the momentum. Civil rights organizations are supporting us. The media is paying attention. This is not just a lawsuit anymore. It is a movement. That evening, Min-jae met with the whistleblowers who were willing to testify. These were former Pacific Sky employees who were risking their careers to tell the truth. What will you testify about? Min-jae asked. I will testify about the culture, Lisa explained. How supervisors made jokes about certain passengers. How they told us to pay special attention to anyone who looked middle. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and cameras. Min-jae adjusted his tie and took a deep breath. This was the first day of the trial. After 6 months of preparation, the moment had finally arrived. Hyejin stood beside him, looking confident in her navy blue suit. Remember, she said quietly, stay calm no matter what happens in there. The jury will be watching you as much as they watch the witnesses. I understand, Min-jae replied. They walked up the steps together. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Park, are you confident you will win? Do you think this will change the airline industry? What do you want people to know? Min-jae paused at the top of the steps and turned to face the cameras. I want people to know this case is about dignity. Every person deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their race or how they dress. Thank you. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was serious and tense. The courtroom was packed with people. Civil rights activists sat in the back rows. Journalists filled the media section. Representatives from other airlines watched quietly, knowing that the outcome would affect their companies too. Pacific Sky Airways had brought a team of expensive lawyers. Their lead attorney, a man named Richard Bradford, was famous for defending corporations. He wore an expensive suit and had a reputation for being aggressive in court. The judge entered and everyone stood. Judge Patricia Morrison was known for being fair but strict. She did not tolerate games or delays. "Please be seated," she said. "We are here for the case of Park versus Pacific Sky Airways. Are both sides ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Hyojin said. "Yes, Your Honor," Richard Bradford agreed. "Very well," Judge Morrison said. "We will begin with opening statements. Ms. Lee, you may proceed." Hyojin stood and walked to face the jury. 12 people sat in the jury box, representing different backgrounds and ages. These 12 people would decide the case. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Hyojin began, "this case is about a simple question. In America, should your skin color determine how you are treated when you buy a plane ticket?" She paused to let the question sink in. Min-jae Park is a successful businessman. He built a technology company that helps save lives. He is worth over $8 billion. But when he tried to board a plane in comfortable clothes, a flight attendant looked at his black skin and Asian features and decided he did not belong in first class. Hyojin walked along the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. The flight attendant did not ask one question. She did not verify one piece of information. She looked at him and made a judgment based purely on his appearance. Then she called security to remove him from the plane. "We will show you video evidence of this incident. You will see Mr. Park being calm and polite. You will see him showing his valid ticket and passport, and you will see him being removed anyway while white passengers in casual clothes were welcomed aboard without question." "But this case is about more than one incident," Hyojin continued. "We will prove that Pacific Sky Airways has a system that allows this discrimination to happen. They have no real training. They ignore complaints. They protect employees who discriminate. They put profit over dignity. We will show you internal documents proving the company knew about these problems and chose to do nothing. We will bring you former employees who will testify about the culture of discrimination. We will present 47 similar incidents where passengers of color were treated unfairly." Hyojin returned to stand in front of the jury box. "At the end of this trial, we will ask you to hold Pacific Sky Airways accountable, not just with money but with a demand for real change. Because every person who buys a plane ticket deserves to be treated with dignity. Thank you." She sat down and Min-jae saw several jurors nodding thoughtfully. Richard Bradford stood up for the defense. He was older, with gray hair and a confident manner. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Richard Bradford and I represent Pacific Sky Airways. Let me start by saying something important. What happened to Mr. Park was unfortunate. No one disputes that. But unfortunate incidents do not automatically mean discrimination." Bradford walked toward the jury with his hands in his pockets, trying to seem casual and reasonable. "Flight attendants have an incredibly difficult job. They are responsible for the safety of hundreds of passengers. After terrorist attacks and security threats, we have asked them to be vigilant, to pay attention, to trust their instincts when something seems wrong." On that day, flight attendant Seo-yeon Kim was doing her job. She saw a passenger in very casual clothes boarding first class. She asked to verify his ticket. That is a reasonable security precaution, not discrimination. Min-jae felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. Bradford continued, "The plaintiff's lawyers want to make this about race, but sometimes the situation is just a misunderstanding. Sometimes an employee makes a mistake without any racist intent. Seo-yeon Kim will testify that she was following standard procedures. She will explain her thinking that day. Yes, Mr. Park was removed from the plane, but he refused to cooperate with the verification process. He became argumentative. Security was called because of his behavior, not his race. Min-jae wanted to stand up and object. He had not been argumentative. The video showed that clearly. But Hyojin put a hand on his arm, reminding him to stay calm. "The plaintiff will show you many complaints from other passengers," Bradford said. "But complaints do not prove discrimination. In an industry that serves millions of passengers every year, there will always be some complaints. Some people are simply difficult customers who are never satisfied. Pacific Sky Airways serves passengers of all races and backgrounds. They have diversity policies. They have training programs. They take complaints seriously. One unfortunate incident does not mean the entire company is racist." Bradford walked back to his table. "We ask you to look at the facts, not emotions. We ask you to understand the difficult situation flight attendants face every day, and we ask you to recognize that a misunderstanding is not the same as discrimination. Thank you." He sat down, looking satisfied with himself. Judge Morrison looked at Hyojin. "Call your first witness." The plaintiff calls Min-jae Park to the stand. Min-jae stood and walked to the witness box. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Then he sat down facing the courtroom. Hee-jin approached with a gentle expression. "Mr. Park, please tell the jury about yourself." Min-jae spoke clearly. "I was born in Busan, South Korea. My mother worked as a cleaning lady. My father left when I was young. We did not have much money, but my mother made sure I got a good education. I moved to the United States for university and started my technology company 12 years ago." "What does your company do?" Hee-jin asked. "We develop artificial intelligence software for medical diagnostics. Our programs help doctors detect diseases earlier and more accurately. We work with hospitals around the world." "And you are the CEO of this company?" "Yes." "How much is your company worth?" "Around $8 billion. Hee-jin showed a photo to the jury. It was Min-jae at a business conference wearing a formal suit. "You look very professional in this photo. Why were you dressed casually on the day of the incident?" Min-jae explained. "I had just finished 3 days of intense business negotiations in Seoul. I had barely slept. The meetings were successful but exhausting. I changed into comfortable clothes for the long flight home. I wear casual clothes frequently when traveling, just like many business travelers do." "Tell us what happened when you tried to board the plane." Min-jae described the incident in detail. He talked about showing his boarding pass and passport, about Seo-yeon Kim's suspicious attitude, about being asked to wait while other passengers boarded without question, about security being called even though he had done nothing wrong. "How did you feel?" Hee-jin asked. Min-jae paused. "Humiliated, angry, but mostly sad. I thought about my mother, who cleaned airplanes and dreamed I would one day fly first class with respect. I thought about all the times in my life when people looked at me and made assumptions. I thought I had achieved enough success that my appearance would not matter anymore. I was wrong. Several jurors looked sympathetic. One woman was wiping her eyes. Hee-jin showed the video that had gone viral. The jury watched in silence. The video showed everything clearly. Min-jae being polite, Seo-yeon being hostile. The way she treated white passengers differently. The security escort. When the video ended, Hee-jin asked, "Mr. Park, in this video, were you being argumentative or difficult?" "No," Min-jae said firmly. "I was calm and cooperative the entire time." "Did you refuse to show your ticket or identification?" "No, I showed everything she asked for." "Why do you believe you were removed from that plane?" Min-jae looked at the jury. "Because when that flight attendant looked at me, she saw a black man in a hoodie and decided I could not possibly afford a first-class ticket. She made a judgment based on my appearance, not on any actual evidence." "Thank you, Mr. Park. No further questions." Now it was Richard Bradford's turn to question Min-jae. This was called cross-examination, and Bradford's job was to make Min-jae look bad or unreliable. "Yes." "Very tired? After 3 days with little sleep?" "Yes." "When people are very tired, they can sometimes be irritable or short-tempered, correct?" Min. On the 4th day of the trial, Hee-jin called an expert witness to the stand. Dr. James Wilson was a professor who studied implicit bias and discrimination in customer service industries. He had written several books on the subject and testified in many discrimination cases. "Dr. Wilson," Hee-jin began after he was sworn in, "can you explain what implicit bias means?" Dr. Wilson adjusted his glasses and spoke clearly so the jury could understand. Implicit bias refers to the attitudes and stereotypes that affect our understanding and decisions in an unconscious way. These biases are different from conscious prejudice. A person can genuinely believe they are not racist while still having unconscious biases that affect their behavior. "How does this apply to situations like airline boarding?" Hee-jin asked. "In many ways," Dr. Wilson explained. "Studies show that people unconsciously associate certain appearances with certain social classes or behaviors. For example, research has found that black men are more likely to be perceived as threatening, even when their behavior is identical to white men. Similarly, people make quick judgments about wealth and status based on clothing and appearance. What happens when these biases are not addressed through training?" Hee-jin continued. "People act on them without realizing it," Dr. Wilson said. "A flight attendant might genuinely believe they are treating all passengers equally, but unconsciously they scrutinize some passengers more than others. They ask more questions of passengers who do not match their mental image of what a first-class passenger should look like." Hee-jin showed Dr. Wilson the Pacific Sky Airways training materials. I have reviewed these materials, Dr. Wilson testified. They are completely inadequate for addressing implicit bias. The 30-minute video provides only surface-level information. There is no discussion of unconscious assumptions, no practice scenarios, no ongoing education. This type of minimal training has been shown to be ineffective. What kind of training would be effective? Hygen asked. Effective training requires several components, Dr. Wilson explained. First, education about how bias works in the brain. Second, practice identifying bias in real situations. Third, concrete strategies for checking assumptions before acting. Fourth, regular refresher training because these skills need constant reinforcement. And finally, accountability systems that track patterns of behavior. Richard Bradford cross-examined Dr. Wilson, trying to suggest his research was biased or unscientific, but Dr. Wilson calmly cited study after study supporting his conclusions. The jury seemed convinced by his expertise. The next witness was Lisa Johnson, the former flight attendant who had quit Pacific Sky Airways because of the discrimination she witnessed. She looked nervous as she took the stand, knowing her testimony could end her career in the airline industry. Ms. Johnson, Hyejin said gently, "Tell us about your time working for Pacific Sky Airways." Lisa took a breath and began. "I worked as a flight attendant for 8 years. I loved the job at first. I enjoyed meeting people from all over the world and helping passengers have a good experience." "What changed?" Hyejin asked. "I started noticing patterns," Lisa said. "Certain passengers were treated with suspicion while others were not. Passengers of color were asked more questions. Their bags were inspected more carefully. They were watched more closely during flights." "Did you experience this treatment yourself when you traveled as a passenger on other airlines?" Lisa nodded. "Many times. Even wearing my Pacific Sky uniform, I was questioned when I traveled. Once I was going home to visit my family, and a flight attendant asked if I was really an employee. She made me show my employee badge 3 times. A white colleague sitting next to me was never asked any questions." "Did you report these concerns to your supervisors?" Hyejin asked. "Yes, multiple times," Lisa said. "I wrote formal complaints. I spoke to my manager. I even sent an email to the vice president of operations. Nothing changed. I was told I was being too sensitive. One supervisor told me if I could not handle the job requirements, maybe I should find different work." "What happened to make you finally quit?" Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "I was working a flight and I saw a colleague treat a black family very poorly. The family had young children. The flight attendant insisted on searching their bags thoroughly, even though they had already been through airport security. She made comments about making sure they did not steal anything from the seat pockets. The father complained, and the flight attendant threatened to have them removed from the plane. I tried to intervene and help, but my colleague got angry with me. After that flight, I realized I could not work for a company that allowed this behavior. I turned in my resignation the next week." Several jurors looked moved by Lisa's testimony. Richard Bradford tried to suggest she quit because she was not good at her job, but Lisa firmly defended her work record. She had received excellent performance reviews until she started complaining about discrimination. The following day, Robert Kim took the stand. He had worked in Pacific Sky's customer service department handling complaints. "Mr. Kim?" Hyejin asked. "How many discrimination complaints did you handle during your 5 years with Pacific Sky?" Robert checked his notes. "I personally handled approximately 120 complaints that involved allegations of discrimination or unfair treatment based on race or appearance." "What happened to those complaints?" "Almost all of them were categorized as customer sensitivity issues and closed without investigation," Robert explained. "We had a computer system for tracking complaints. When you marked something as a customer sensitivity issue, the system automatically generated a response letter. The letter said we regretted any inconvenience and valued the passenger's feedback, but nothing else happened." "Did anyone ever investigate whether the complaints had merit?" Hyejin asked. "Not that I saw," Robert said. "The attitude was that customers complain about everything. Some complaints are valid, some are not, but investigating takes time and resources. It was easier to send an apology letter and move on." "Did you ever try to push for investigations?" "Yes," Robert said. "When I saw patterns like the same flight attendant getting multiple similar complaints, I brought it to my supervisor's attention. I was told not to worry about it. My supervisor said flight attendants have stressful jobs and some passengers are just difficult. He told me to close the complaints and focus on processing more tickets. Hyejin showed Robert several complaint files. Do you recognize these? Robert studied them. Yes, these are complaints about Seo-yeon Kim, the flight attendant involved in Mr. Park's incident. I handled several of these personally. How many complaints about Ms. Kim did you process? At least 10, possibly more. I remember her name because it came up so frequently. What were the complaints about? They all followed a similar pattern, Robert said. Passengers of color felt they were treated suspiciously or asked to prove themselves in ways other passengers were not. Several mentioned being questioned about whether their tickets were legitimate or whether they belonged in first class. Did anyone at Pacific Sky ever investigate why one employee had so many similar complaints? Not while I worked there, Robert answered. Richard Bradford's cross-examination tried to suggest that Robert was lying or exaggerating to help Min-jae's case. But Robert remained steady in his testimony and had documents to support everything he said. Jessica Martinez, the former human resources employee, testified next. She brought proposals she had made to management about implementing better diversity training. I researched several programs, Jessica explained to the jury. I found reputable companies that specialize in helping airlines reduce discrimination. I prepared detailed proposals with cost breakdowns and expected benefits. What happened to your proposals? Hyejin asked. All rejected, Jessica said. The vice president of human resources told me we had limited training budgets and safety training was the priority. He said diversity training was nice to have but not essential. Did you try to explain why it was important? Yes, Jessica said. I showed him data about lawsuits other companies had faced due to discrimination. I explained that good training could prevent expensive legal problems. He said we had insurance for lawsuits and we would handle problems if they arose. He did not want to spend money on prevention. How much did the training programs cost? Hyejin asked. Jessica checked her files. The most expensive comprehensive program was $50,000. That would have provided initial training for all employees plus annual refresher courses. How much does Pacific Sky Airways spend on other types of training? Millions of dollars annually, Jessica answered. Safety training, security protocols, customer service basics, new technology systems. Training is a huge part of the budget, but diversity and bias prevention got nothing except that old video. Richard Bradford tried to argue that the training video was sufficient, but Jessica systematically explained why it did not meet professional standards for effective bias prevention. Richard Bradford questioned her gently, trying to make her seem sympathetic. Ms. Kim, please tell the jury about your career with Pacific Sky Airways. Seo-yeon spoke quietly. The final witness for the defense was Ji-hoon Choi, the CEO of Pacific Sky Airways. He wore an expensive suit and walked to the witness stand with confidence. This was his chance to defend his company and his leadership. Richard Bradford began the questioning. Mr. Choi, please tell the jury about Pacific Sky Airways. Ji-hoon spoke with pride. Pacific Sky is one of the largest international airlines in the world. We serve over 50 million passengers every year. We employ 30,000 people across 40 countries. Our mission is to connect people and cultures through safe, reliable air travel. What is your company's position on discrimination? Bradford asked. We are absolutely against discrimination of any kind, Ji-hoon said firmly. Pacific Sky serves passengers from every nation, every race, every background. Discrimination has no place in our company. Does Pacific Sky have policies against discrimination? Yes, very clear policies, Ji-hoon answered. Our employee handbook explicitly forbids discriminatory behavior. We have a code of conduct that all employees must follow. Does the company provide training on these issues? We provide comprehensive training to all new employees, Ji-hoon said. They learn about treating passengers with respect and following our values. Bradford showed the jury the employee handbook and training video. Are these the materials you refer to? Yes, Ji-hoon confirmed. Richard Bradford sat down looking satisfied. Now Hyejin stood up for cross-examination. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Mr. Choi, Hyejin began, you testified that Pacific Sky is absolutely against discrimination. Is that correct? Yes. Then why did your company receive over 200 discrimination complaints in the past 3 years? Ji-hoon shifted uncomfortably. In an industry serving millions of passengers, some complaints are inevitable. Not every complaint is valid. Are you suggesting these passengers lied about being discriminated against? Hyejin asked. Not necessarily lied, Ji-hoon said carefully, but sometimes people are overly sensitive or misinterpret situations. Hee-jin showed documents to the jury. These are emails from your vice president of operations. In this email from 2 years ago, a civil rights organization offered to provide free diversity training to your airline. They said they had heard concerns about passenger treatment and wanted to help. Do you remember this? Ji-hoon hesitated. I received many emails. I do not remember that specific one. Let me refresh your memory, Hee-jin said. You personally responded to this email. You wrote, and I quote, Pacific Sky already has adequate training and does not need outside help. Bringing in consultants would suggest we have problems, which we do not. I was protecting the company's reputation, Ji-hoon explained, by refusing free help that could have prevented discrimination. Hee-jin pressed. Were you more concerned about appearing to have a problem than actually solving the problem? That is not fair, Ji-hoon protested. Hee-jin showed more emails. Here is another message. A diversity consulting firm proposed a training program for $50,000. Your response was that this was too expensive and not essential. Is that correct? We have limited training budgets, Ji-hoon said. Mr. Choi, how much does Pacific Sky spend annually on cleaning supplies? Hee-jin asked. Ji-hoon looked confused by the question. I do not know the exact amount. Several $1 million probably. Several $1 million on cleaning supplies, but $50,000 for diversity training was too expensive. Those are different budget categories, Ji-hoon argued. Let me ask you this, Hee-jin continued. How much has this lawsuit cost Pacific Sky so far in legal fees? I do not have that number available, Ji-hoon said. Would you believe me if I told you it has cost your company over $5 million so far? Hee-jin asked. Do you see how $50,000 in prevention might have been a wise investment? Ji-hoon had no good answer. Hee-jin pulled out more documents. You testified that discrimination has no place in your company, but we have evidence that flight attendant Seo-young Kim received 17 complaints over 3 years, all from passengers of color, all describing similar behavior. She was promoted twice during this period. Can you explain why an employee with a clear pattern of discrimination was promoted rather than disciplined? I was not aware of these specific complaints, Ji-hoon said. You were not aware? Hee-jin repeated. You are the CEO. You set the culture for the entire company. Are you saying you pay no attention to patterns of discrimination? We have systems for handling complaints, Ji-hoon said defensively. I trust my management team to address issues appropriately. But they did not address issues appropriately, did they? Hee-jin pointed out. They closed complaints without investigation. They protected employees who discriminated. They rejected training programs that could have helped. And you, as CEO, allowed this culture to continue. Ji-hoon's face was red now. I have 30,000 employees. I cannot personally monitor everyone. No one expects you to monitor everyone, Hee-jin said. But you are responsible for creating systems that prevent discrimination. You are responsible for taking complaints seriously. You are responsible for implementing effective training, and the evidence shows you failed to do any of these things. She paused to let her words sink in. Mr. Choi, do you believe Min Jae Park was discriminated against on that flight? I believe there was a misunderstanding, Ji-hoon said carefully. A misunderstanding? Hee-jin repeated. A black man with a valid first-class ticket was removed from a plane while white passengers in similar clothing were welcomed aboard. And you call that a misunderstanding? The flight attendant made an error in judgment, Ji-hoon admitted. An error that happened repeatedly to multiple passengers over years while your company did nothing to prevent it, Hee-jin said. That is not an error, Mr. Choi. That is a system failure. And you are responsible for that system. She returned to her seat. Ji-hoon left the witness stand looking shaken. After 2 more days of testimony, both sides gave their closing arguments. Richard Bradford tried to portray the incident as an unfortunate mistake by one employee. He asked the jury to consider the difficult job flight attendants have and not punish an entire company for one person's error. Hee-jin's closing argument was powerful. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about accountability. Pacific Sky Airways created a system that allowed discrimination to flourish. They ignored complaints. They rejected training. They protected employees who mistreated passengers. And when finally confronted with video evidence of their failures, they offered money to make it go away instead of committing to real change. She walked along the jury box, making eye contact with each juror, You have seen the evidence. 47 incidents, 200 complaints, emails proving the company knew about problems and chose to ignore them. Testimony from employees who tried to create change and were shut down. And you have seen that viral video of Min Jae Park being humiliated for no reason except the color of his skin. We are asking you to send a message that discrimination has consequences, not just for the employees who discriminate, but for the companies that allow it to happen. We are asking for financial damages that will make Pacific Sky and every other airline take these issues seriously, and we are asking for mandatory changes that will protect future passengers. Everyone who buys a plane ticket deserves dignity. Everyone deserves respect. And companies that fail to provide this deserve to be held accountable. Thank you. The jury left to deliberate. Min Jae and his legal team waited anxiously. Hours passed. Then a full day. The jury requested to review certain evidence and watch the video again. On the second day of deliberation, Min Jae sat in a coffee shop near the courthouse. He could not focus on work. His phone kept ringing with reporters asking for comments, but he ignored the calls. Hee-jin called him. The jury has reached a verdict. We need to get back to court. Min Jae's heart raced as he returned to the courthouse. The courtroom filled quickly with observers. News cameras lined up outside. Everyone knew this verdict would make history. Judge Morrison entered. Please be seated. I understand the jury has reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor, the jury foreman said, standing up. He was an older man who had been a school principal before retiring. Please read the verdict. The foreman held a paper and read clearly. In the case of Park versus Pacific Sky Airways, we the jury find in favor of the plaintiff Min Jae Park. We find that Pacific Sky Airways is liable for discrimination and negligent supervision of employees. The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Judge Morrison called for order. The foreman continued. We award the plaintiff $450 million in compensatory and punitive damages. Min Jae felt his breath catch. $450 million. It was an enormous amount, but the foreman was not finished. In addition to monetary damages, we recommend the following mandatory reforms. 1. Pacific Sky Airways must implement comprehensive diversity and bias prevention training for all employees, with annual refresher courses. 2. The company must establish an independent review board to investigate discrimination complaints. 3. Pacific Sky must hire a chief diversity officer who reports directly to the board of directors. 4. The company must publish annual public reports on passenger complaints and diversity metrics. 3 days after the verdict, Min Jae stood in a conference room with lawyers and financial advisors. They were planning the structure of the Dignity and Travel Foundation. The $450 million would fund programs to fight discrimination, not just in airlines, but throughout the travel industry. We can fund research, training programs, legal assistance for discrimination victims, and advocacy work, his foundation director explained. This amount of money can create real systemic change. Min Jae nodded. I want to make sure we are not just treating symptoms. We need to address root causes. Why does discrimination happen? How do we prevent it? What systems need to change? Over the next few weeks, other lawsuits began appearing. Passengers who had seen Min Jae's case found courage to file their own complaints against Pacific Sky and other airlines. The law firm Hee-jin worked for was contacted by dozens of potential clients with similar stories. A black businessman sued another major airline for removing him from a flight after a white passenger complained he looked threatening. A Muslim family sued for being interrogated by flight attendants about their travel plans in front of other passengers. A Latino man sued for being forced to prove his identity repeatedly, while white passengers were not questioned. Each case cited Min Jae's victory as precedent. The legal landscape was changing rapidly. Pacific Sky Airways faced a crisis. In addition to the $450 million judgment, they now faced 23 additional lawsuits from other passengers. Their stock price continued falling. Customers were canceling flights and choosing other airlines. Major corporate clients announced they would not book business travel on Pacific Sky until significant changes were made. The company's new CEO, a woman named Susan Martinez, who had previously led a successful hotel chain, held a press conference. Pacific Sky Airways is committed to fundamental change, she announced. We are implementing all the reforms required by the court verdict, and we are going further. We are creating a culture where every passenger feels valued and respected. Susan outlined a comprehensive plan. The airline would hire diversity consultants to completely redesign their training program. They would establish a passenger advocacy office, where discrimination complaints would be investigated independently. They would set specific diversity goals for hiring and promoting employees, and they would publish transparent reports every quarter showing their progress. We failed our passengers, Susan said honestly. We allowed a culture where discrimination could happen without consequences. That ends now. I am personally committed to making Pacific Sky an example of how companies can learn from mistakes and become better. The aviation industry watched nervously. If Pacific Sky could face such severe consequences, any airline could be next. Industry associations organized conferences on preventing discrimination. Training companies that specialized in bias prevention saw their business increase dramatically. Min Jae was invited to speak at an aviation industry conference. He stood before hundreds of airline executives and shared his experience. I am not here to shame or blame you, Min Jae told them, but I am here to tell you that change is necessary and possible. Your employees are not bad people, but without proper training and accountability systems, even good people make biased decisions. He showed them research data. Studies prove that everyone has unconscious biases. Everyone. The question is not whether your employees have biases. The question is whether you are giving them tools to recognize and counteract those biases. The executives listened intently. Min Jae had their attention not just because of his lawsuit victory, but because of his business success. He was one of them, a billionaire CEO who understood corporate pressures and realities. Implementing good training costs money, Min Jae continued, but discrimination lawsuits cost much more. Beyond the financial cost, there is reputation damage, customer loss, and employee morale problems. Investing in prevention is smart business. After his speech, several airline CEOs approached him privately. We want to do better, one told him, but we need guidance. The training programs available are confusing. Some seem like they will not work. Others are very expensive. Can your foundation help? This gave Min Jae an idea. The Dignity and Travel Foundation could become a resource for companies that genuinely wanted to improve. They could evaluate training programs and certify effective ones. They could create best practice guidelines. They could recognize companies that demonstrated real commitment to fair treatment. 2 months after the verdict, Min Jae visited Pacific Sky Airways headquarters. Susan Martinez had invited him to see their new training program in action. He was skeptical but curious. In a training room, 30 flight attendants were participating in an interactive workshop. Not just watching a video, but actually practicing difficult scenarios with professional facilitators. One scenario showed a passenger in casual clothing boarding first class. The facilitators asked flight attendants to identify their first thoughts. Several admitted they would wonder if the passenger was in the right section. That thought is normal, the facilitator explained. Humans make quick judgments. But good training helps you pause before acting on those judgments. How can you verify a passenger's ticket without making them feel suspected or judged? The flight attendants practiced different approaches. They learned to check boarding passes discreetly, to ask questions in friendly rather than accusatory tones, to recognize when their assumptions might be based on appearance rather than actual behavior. Another scenario addressed what to do when seeing a colleague treat a passenger unfairly. The training taught flight attendants to intervene supportively, to report concerns through proper channels, and to document incidents. Min Jae watched for 2 hours. The training was thorough and realistic. It addressed unconscious bias directly and gave practical tools for overcoming it. This was nothing like the old 30-minute video. After the session, he spoke with the flight attendants. "What do you think of this training?" he asked. A woman named Maria answered, "It is uncomfortable sometimes. Recognizing my own biases is hard, but it is valuable. I can already see situations in the past where I could have handled things better." Another flight attendant, a man named David, added, "I appreciate that the training does not just tell us we are wrong. It gives us tools to improve, and it acknowledges that this is difficult work that requires ongoing practice." Susan Martinez walked with Min Jae through the headquarters. "Every employee will go through this training over the next 6 months, she explained. Then we will have refresher courses quarterly. We are also redesigning our complaint system so passengers can report concerns easily and know they will be taken seriously. What about Seo-yeon Kim? Min-jae asked. The flight attendant who had removed him from the plane had been terminated, but Min-jae wondered what happened to her. Susan pulled out a file. Seo-yeon completed a voluntary diversity education program through a non-profit organization. She has written personal letters of apology to you and to several other passengers she treated poorly. She is currently working for a local business while rebuilding her life. She has asked if she could possibly volunteer with your foundation to share her story and help others learn from her mistakes. Min-jae was surprised. She wants to volunteer? She recognizes the harm she caused, Susan said. She told me she wants to use her experience to help prevent others from making the same mistakes. Whether you accept her offer is entirely your decision. Min-jae thought about it. He did not forgive easily, and the humiliation he experienced was still painful. But he also believed in redemption and second chances. Let me consider it, he said. That evening, he discussed the idea with his foundation team. If Seo-yeon is genuinely remorseful and wants to help, her perspective could be valuable, one advisor said. She can speak to other employees about how bias affected her judgment and destroyed her career. That might be more powerful than having experts lecture people. Min-jae agreed to meet with Seo-yeon. They met at a quiet coffee shop, both nervous about the encounter. Seo-yeon looked different from how she appeared in court. She seemed smaller, sadder, and genuinely regretful. Mr. Park, thank you for agreeing to see me, she said. I know you have no reason to give me your time. I wanted to hear what you have to say, Min-jae replied. Seo-yeon took a breath. I have spent months thinking about what I did. I have completed training on unconscious bias. I have read books and articles. I have talked to a therapist about my assumptions and prejudices. I am not the same person who removed you from that plane. What changed? Min-jae asked. I face consequences for the first time, Seo-yeon said honestly. Before, when passengers complained, nothing happened. Management dismissed the complaints, and I told myself the passengers were too sensitive. But when I lost my job and saw my face all over the news, I could not hide anymore. I had to confront the truth about my behavior. She pulled out a notebook. I have written letters to every passenger I can identify who filed complaints about me. I apologized and took full responsibility. Some wrote back and accepted my apology. Others did not respond, which I understand. I hurt people, and some wounds do not heal easily. 1 year after the verdict, Min-jae stood in a hotel ballroom filled with airline executives, civil rights leaders, and government officials. The Dignity in Travel Foundation was hosting its first annual conference on fair treatment in the travel industry. The response had exceeded all expectations, with over 800 attendees from 40 countries. The foundation had grown rapidly. With the $450 million from the lawsuit, they had established offices in 5 cities, hired a staff of 60 people, and launched programs across the travel sector. They were not just focused on airlines anymore, but also hotels, rental car companies, cruise lines, and tourism businesses. Min-jae opened the conference with a speech. 1 year ago, a flight attendant looked at me and made assumptions based on my appearance. That moment of discrimination led to a lawsuit, a verdict, and a movement for change. Today, I am proud to share the progress we have made together. He displayed statistics on the screen. Pacific Sky Airways, the company at the center of our lawsuit, has reduced discrimination complaints by 89%. They have implemented comprehensive training for all employees. They have established an independent review board that investigates every complaint thoroughly, and they have published quarterly reports showing their commitment to transparency and accountability. The audience applauded. Susan Martinez, Pacific Sky's CEO, sat in the front row. She had become an ally in the fight for fair treatment, using her company's transformation as an example for others. Min-jae continued. But Pacific Sky is not alone. 17 other major airlines have voluntarily adopted similar reforms. They have recognized that treating passengers with dignity is not just morally right, it is good business. Airlines that implement strong anti-discrimination programs see higher customer satisfaction, better employee morale, and fewer legal problems. He shared more data. Our foundation has trained over 50,000 airline employees this year. We have provided legal assistance to 130 passengers who experienced discrimination. We have helped 23 of those cases reach successful settlements, with an average payout of $3 million and mandatory policy changes for the airlines involved. The travel industry is changing, Min-jae said. Not as fast as we would like, but faster than many people thought possible. And this change is happening because of all of you in this room who believe that dignity matters. Throughout the day, various speakers presented on different aspects of discrimination prevention. Dr. James Wilson, the expert who had testified at Min Jae's trial, shared the latest research on implicit bias. His studies showed that regular training, combined with accountability systems, could significantly reduce discriminatory behavior. Lisa Johnson, the former Pacific Sky flight attendant who had become a whistleblower, now worked full-time for the foundation as a training specialist. She led a workshop on recognizing and addressing discrimination in real time. Her presentation drew from her 8 years of experience in the airline industry and her personal experiences facing discrimination as both an employee and a passenger. The most powerful moment of the conference came when Seo-yeon Kim took the stage. The ballroom grew quiet as the flight attendant who had removed Min Jae from the plane walked to the podium. Many people in the audience knew her story. Some were skeptical about her participation in the conference. Seo-yeon stood silently for a moment, gathering courage. Then she began to speak. My name is Seo-yeon Kim. 1 year ago, I made a terrible mistake that harmed another human being and changed my life forever. I removed Min Jae Park from an airplane because I made assumptions based on how he looked. I convinced myself I was following proper procedures, but I was really acting on my biases and prejudices. She paused, emotion clear in her voice. I lost my job. I lost my career. My face was all over the news as an example of discrimination. I was angry at first, thinking everyone was overreacting, but slowly, through education and self-reflection, I realized the truth. I had hurt people, not just Mr. Park, but many passengers over the years who I treated with suspicion simply because they did not match my narrow idea of what certain passengers should look like. Seo-yeon looked directly at the audience. I am not here to make excuses or ask for sympathy. I am here to tell you that bias can affect anyone. I genuinely did not think I was racist. I had friends from different backgrounds. I worked with colleagues of all races, but when faced with split-second decisions, my unconscious biases took control. The training I received as a flight attendant was inadequate, she continued. That 30-minute video did nothing to prepare me to recognize or challenge my own assumptions. If I had received the kind of training that is now standard at Pacific Sky and other airlines, I might have made different choices. I might not have hurt people. She shared specific examples from her career, moments she now recognized as discriminatory but had not seen as problems at the time. I questioned passengers of color more frequently about their tickets. I watched them more carefully during flights, assuming they were more likely to cause problems. I gave white passengers the benefit of the doubt while treating others with suspicion. And because my supervisors never addressed these patterns, I thought my behavior was acceptable. Facing consequences changed me, Seo-yeon said. Losing my job forced me to examine my actions and beliefs. Completing real diversity education helped me understand how bias works in the brain. And volunteering with the Dignity in Travel Foundation has given me a chance to help others avoid making my mistakes. She concluded with a direct message. To the airline employees in this room, please take training seriously. It feels uncomfortable to acknowledge your own biases, but that discomfort is necessary for growth. To the executives, please invest in comprehensive training and accountability systems. They work, they prevent harm, and they protect your employees from making career-destroying mistakes like I did. And to Mr. Park, thank you for giving me a chance at redemption. I know I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I am grateful for the opportunity to contribute to positive change. The audience sat in stunned silence for a moment, then erupted in applause. Seo-yeon's honesty and vulnerability had moved many people. Her transformation showed that change was possible, even for those who had caused harm. During the lunch break, Min Jae found himself in conversation with several airline CEOs. They had questions about implementing effective programs at their companies. Our biggest challenge is getting employees to take training seriously, one CEO admitted. They see it as just another requirement to check off a list. Min Jae nodded. That is why the training must be engaging and relevant. Generic lectures about being nice to everyone do not work. Employees need realistic scenarios they might actually encounter. They need to practice making better decisions. And they need to understand that this training protects them as much as it protects passengers. Another CEO asked about costs. Our board is concerned about the expense of comprehensive training programs. Show them the cost of lawsuits, Min Jae replied. Show them the cost of negative publicity. Show them the cost of losing customers who choose other airlines because they have heard about discrimination. Prevention is always cheaper than dealing with consequences. A government official from the Department of Transportation joined the conversation. We are considering making certain types of anti-discrimination training mandatory for all airlines. Would the industry support that? The CEOs exchanged glances. Finally, one spoke up. If it is done right, with reasonable standards and flexibility in how we implement them, I think most of us would support mandatory training. It would level the playing field and ensure all airlines meet minimum standards. This was progress. A year ago, airlines would have fought any government mandates. Now they recognize that regulation might actually help the industry address discrimination more consistently. That afternoon, the conference featured a panel of passengers who had experienced discrimination and fought back legally. Dr. Angela Thompson, who had been asked to prove she was a doctor before helping a sick passenger, shared how her lawsuit had led to policy changes at the airline she had sued. They settled quickly and agreed to revise their procedures, Dr. Thompson explained. Now, when a passenger offers medical assistance, flight attendants are trained to accept help graciously, unless there is a specific reason to doubt the person's qualifications. My case was not about money. It was about respect for professionals who want to help. Khalid Rahman, the businessman who had been searched 3 times on one flight, described his settlement. The airline paid damages and agreed to implement new search procedures. Security checks must now be random or based on actual suspicious behavior, not on passenger appearance or ethnicity. It is a small change, but it matters. Each panelist emphasized the same message. Speaking up makes a difference. Their lawsuits had created change that benefited many other passengers beyond themselves. Near the end of the conference, Minjay participated in a panel discussion about the future of the movement. A moderator asked him, "What are your goals for the next 5 years?"